I Know Watch Radio is brought to you in part by Sushi Market Sprouts on 7th in Santa Cruz and Kaito in the Capitol Mall Food Court. Treat yourself to the finest Japanese cuisine you'll find anywhere with fresh sushi to go and delicious ramen dinners. Sushi Market Sprouts and Kaito. Yum! 2:06, good afternoon. I'm Bill Graff. This is China Watch Radio. I'm here today, as always, with Michael Olson and John T. Collier, and later on we'll check in with Amy Howe, who will be here. And we are talking about China. This is the program that we focus on China. We want to tell you that today we're going to ask some important questions. I think the main question we'll talk about today is Xi Jinping's big choice. Whether he backs Russia or the West. Good afternoon, Michael.
And as Yogi Berra once said, famously, when you get to the fork in the road, take it.
Good afternoon, John T. How are you?
I'm very well, and an absolute pleasure to be here with you, gents.
Boy, what a big question. Considering what's going on in the world now, the whole situation that's taking place in the Ukraine with Russia flexing its muscles, and China already making such a big agreement, so to speak, a public agreement, a sort of a marriage, I guess, with China. It becomes very important to watch all the decisions that Xi Jinping is going to have to make here quickly.
Epochal. It's a very, very, very significant opinion. And, probably one of the biggest opinions of our lifetimes when you think about the implications of where it's going to take the world.
Well, yeah, particularly maybe folks a little younger than me. My lifetime has seen some fairly, big decisions with the Vietnam War and whatnot. But certainly for folks who are younger than about 40, this is the biggest decision they're ever going to see.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
So let's start off with Russia seeking military aid from China, according to a U.S. official. This is a very important topic. The United States says that Russia has asked China for military equipment to use in its invasion of the Ukraine. This is a request that heightened tensions, no kidding, all around the world. And it's interesting because they're mincing words here. They're talking about military hardware. I have yet to really figure out militarily what's the difference between an airplane and a drone.
Purpose,
perhaps. But the drone, can be armed, and so therefore, really,
that's what I meant. Purpose. What the purpose of the implement is being used for. I mean, if you're using it to plow a farm field, it's one thing, but if you're using it to shoot a rocket at somebody, it's another thing.
So let's assume that we're talking about armed drones, and if we are, then really, what is the difference between an armed military aircraft that's being flown by a pilot in the cockpit, or a armed military drone which is being flown by a pilot 20 miles away but can see everything in the cockpit?
I think to answer that question, we have to look at how that technology is rapidly developing. The answer to that question 4 years ago would be different than it is today, and I don't think that there's a lot of folks looking at the development of this sort of technology who would project 10 years out into the future and think that there would be anything that a drone couldn't do that a pilot could. So it's rapidly changing. We are where we are at right now. In terms of the sort of technology that the drone technology that both the Ukraine and Russia are trying to acquire through their various allegiances, they're looking at small suicide drones, basically. A drone that's designed to loiter around a bit until it sees an enemy vehicle or an enemy position and then crash into it.
That's going to put suicide bombers out of business. Because why carry a suicide vest when you can launch a suicide drone?
Well, that might be, strangely enough, a better development, actually, but
Or maybe not.
it just depends how you look at it.
So it still doesn't answer the question, Jonty, though. What is the difference between an armed drone and an
The
armed
effective
aircraft?
difference is what I mean. I mean, I know the difference. There's not a human being
Yeah.
on board, but I mean, the effective difference is pretty small.
In diplomatic terms, right?
Exactly. That's what I mean. So something we'll have to follow closely, because this is why they're talking about the no-fly zone not being possible and a whole bunch of other things over the Ukraine, because they're saying that if we send armed, piloted aircraft over there and establish a no-fly zone, then we're participating in the war ourselves. But if we're flying a drone in there,
Well, if we flew a drone in there, or NATO flew a drone in there, then it would be a dramatic escalation. Though I mean, the extent to which NATO is supplying arms to the Ukraine is extraordinary. I mean, the United States Senate just approved $13 billion worth of aid to the Ukraine. To put that in context, the annual military budget of France, Germany, the UK, and Russia, it all averages out to around 50 billion, 60 billion a year. So $13 billion in that context is a heck of a lot of money. That is a huge arms deal. It's a contemporary equivalent of something like the Lend-Lease Act of the Second World War.
wow, I hadn't thought of it that way, but boy, when you put it in that context, it's pretty amazing that much, what is that, about a 25 or 30% of those other countries' combined annual military budget. That's a significant amount we've put into the pie there.
Right, absolutely. With regards to things like the applicable difference between drones and, let's say, a fourth-generation fighter like the MiG-29, a drone is something that's much more easy for folks to train on and learn how to use. And it's a lot more easy to transfer from one military to the other. Right now, the Russian military is distributing, these aren't drones exactly, but they're distributing pamphlets on how to use the anti-tank missiles that the United States, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, and the UK have been shipping to the Ukrainians. Because they've captured so many, the Russians have captured so many of them. They're like, gosh, we got to learn how to use them, guys. We might as well. What you have technology that exists at that sort of level, something like a MiG-29. There's this whole idea, this I think not very mature idea, put forward that Poland would give all of their, well, not all, but a large portion of their MiG-29s to Ukraine
Because they can fly them.
So, yes, but there's the misconception. So you have NATO-adapted communications technology. You have all kinds of NATO technology on it that has to be stripped out and replaced because the Ukrainians don't have that. And then everything in the plane is in Polish. And it's not necessarily easy to go to the computer within an aircraft like that and just simply select language Ukrainian. It doesn't work quite like that. It's not a simple thing to change. The flight controls are different. All kinds of stuff it's the same airframe, but it's not the same. It's not, you can't just hop from one.
The
craft to the
configuration
other
is different. The configuration is different. Yeah.
There you go.
Let me get back to this whole thing about equipment and promises and things like that. The United States is now saying that Russia has asked China for military equipment to use in its invasion of Ukraine. That request heightened tensions about the situation in Ukraine between senior U.S. and Chinese officials in Rome. Who are meeting to talk. In advance of talks on Monday, White House NSA's Jake Sullivan has bluntly warned China to avoid helping Russia evade punishment from global sanctions that have hammered the Russian economy so far. We will not allow that to go forward, he says. The White House has said in talks in the Italian capital that they plan to focus on the direct effect of Russia's war against Ukraine on regional and global security. Now, when I hear that, I'm thinking to myself, isn't that what we're already seeing the United States focused on? I mean, after Russia decided to invade Ukraine, and even before, weren't we not all looking at the same set of circumstances? It just seems a little after the horse and the cart have already left the barn, so to speak.
Right. Well, I think we're seeing a dramatic acceleration of trends that were already in place. Although the nuance there is that when things are happening very quickly, and there's that higher degree of chaos, there's also the so much more potential for any side to underestimate the consequences of their actions.
Indeed. So we have quite a situation. Even though the program is, of course, focused on what China is going to do, we have to bring in some other factors around the world that will contribute to what China decides to do. And when I say China, I mean Xi Jinping, because he is, as we'll hear in our second hour, Xi Jinping is looking at some internal issues that will affect his decisions on the worldwide stage. And we'll be checking in with Amy Howe later on to talk about that. But I find it quite interesting that this situation we have in China right now is as gripping to the rest of the world as I've ever seen any. I think the last time I remember reading about anything this gripping to the world was when the USSR tried to put missiles in Cuba and the problem that caused way back with President Kennedy trying to make some decisions that, it was pretty scary there for a couple of weeks.
I remember that. I remember my mother and the fear in her eyes. When, of course, I didn't know what was going on. But I read the fear in my parents' eyes.
We were all a little too young, the kids, our generation. But boy, our parents were pretty upset about that whole scene. So I can only imagine what the world thinks of what's going on with the decisions that Xi Jinping is going to make. Now, fellas, where do you want to go from here? Because we sort of...
I think I'm up.
You're up?
Yeah.
All right.
And I think I'd like to pick up the meeting in Rome.
All right.
And that you touched on briefly. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, of course, China Watch Radio is news and commentary. So we look for news out of China, and we put it on the table, and we ask, what the heck does this mean for us in the world? And there was a meeting this past Monday in Rome between the United States and China. It was the first meeting they've had since Russia invaded Ukraine, and that's what it was.
It was quite a long time ago, before even the Olympics.
That's right. So they've been China and Russia have been meeting, but the United States and China
have not.
Yeah. So we just met for the first time this past Monday. 7 hours. The diplomats got together. Now, who were the diplomats? Well, first of all, China was represented by Yang Jieshi, who we have met before in Alaska. Remember?
Oh, that's when he told his counterparts on the American side of the table that they had no business being there.
Yeah, actually, Yang Jieshi is the second stringer. He's not the Secretary of State in China. He is a second stringer, as is our representative at the Rome meeting, Jake Sullivan. So we have couple second stringers getting together. And of course, this meeting had been planned a long time ago, but so what happened? Well, we remember in Anchorage when the two sides met, Yang Jieshi looked at Anthony Blinken and said, "Look, dude, you have no right to talk to us about anything. You're in no position at all to talk with us."
Yeah, he basically said, "Why?" I mean, he didn't come out and ask the question, but he might as well have.
Well, you did.
Why are you here?
Yeah. So what he did is that when our diplomat who was at the time, I forgot, our Secretary of State.
It's Blinken. Anthony Blinken.
Yeah, Anthony Blinken. When Blinken looked at China and said, "You guys are terrible for what you're doing to the Uyghurs," and so on. Well, Yang Jieshi looked at him and said, "Look what you're doing. You have been discriminating against black people forever." And he held up Black Lives Matter and said, "You can't talk with us about anything." And what was really interesting about that incident, I think, was that Wang Yang was introducing the whole notion of wolf diplomacy. So instead of diplomats talking like community organizers, they're talking like wolves getting ready to kill and eat. And that was a kind of a new evolution in the diplomacy. We're not going to listen to you. We're here to take you out, that kind of thing. At any rate, 7-hour discussion between the United States and China.
That's quite a long period of time, actually.
And as you mentioned, Bloomberg was reporting that before the meeting, the U.S. told its European allies that Moscow asked Beijing for military assistance, and that Beijing responded favorably to that request. Now, if you're going to go into a marriage counseling meeting with your wife or husband with whom you've been having a significant dispute, right? And you were, before the meeting, you were to go to church and tell everybody in church that your significant other had been having an affair with somebody else. And then you were to go in the meeting at the marriage counselor. What do you think would happen?
This is an interesting analogy you've come up with.
Well,
I don't know if it's exactly right,
but it's pretty darn close, because if you think about it, that's exactly what happened. The Biden administration told everybody in Europe that China had been fooling around with Russia. And now they're going to sit in a meeting together and work this thing through. And so
I don't know that the analogy of the United States and Russia being married is
it wasn't
really.
The United States, but at any rate, there was a significant difficulty in coming to terms during the 7-hour meeting.
Well, that's a diplomatic way to put it.
Yeah. So for 7 hours, they sat there looking across the table and essentially doing wolf diplomacy.
Yeah, they were glaring at each other with their teeth bared. Yeah.
And so when their press releases came out after this 7-hour sweat-a-thon, both sides said their talks were substantial and constructive, but did not mention any specific outcome. So that were, which is another way of saying nothing transpired there. So readouts of the meeting say that Yang Jieshi spent most of his time condemning the U.S. for its support of Taiwan.
Yeah.
Okay?
Exactly.
So we're not talking about the Ukraine. We're not talking about our relationship with Russia. We're talking about our relationship with Taiwan, and you're messing around with it. So Yang kept saying, the U.S. explicitly recognized that there is only one China, meaning that Taiwan is not China. The current U.S. administration has pledged to adhere to the one China policy and not to support Taiwan independence, but its actions are obviously inconsistent with its statements. So already we're not talking even about Russia and the Ukraine. We're talking about you and I and Taiwan. And it's
I find it so serendipitous that you use that same metaphor of a divorce that came up in conversation for me earlier this morning. It is, I see it very much as the beginning of a divorce process, and Taiwan is there's a custody battle over Taiwan.
Yeah.
The two parents have a different idea about their relationship, and the nuance there, the critical nuance, is to realize that China sees Taiwan as a part of itself, an unresolved civil war. And so how mainland China resolves the civil war with Taiwan is a question of sovereignty. They want their national sovereignty to be respected in that regard. Taiwan is a part of our nation, so let us resolve our problems internally. The United States doesn't view it that way. The United States...
Oh, but officially it does.
That's
Because
right.
of the United States...
Because of the treaty.
So we have signed the papers.
It was a number of years ago.
Yeah, the Washington Post said that Washington Post quoted an unnamed senior Biden administration official who said the meeting was really intense and confirmed that it lasts 7 hours and claimed that Sullivan reiterated our one China policy based on the Taiwan Relations Act, 3 communiques and 6 assurances. So, apparently, in the 7-hour meeting, we acceded to China's demands that we recognize that one China policy.
It's funny, though. I'm sort of with Jonty in his observation about this because as I mentioned in last week's program, I just don't see the United States abandoning Taiwan because of its location in the world and its relative importance as related to other countries in that region.
Mm-hmm. Well, what was interesting to me about the meeting was that instead of focusing on Russia and Ukraine, the Chinese diplomats turned it right around and focused it on Taiwan.
They didn't waste any time doing it either.
And they didn't waste any time doing it either.
Well, that's their bargaining chip. So what are we trying to get from China in return for our
that's the question,
continuing strategic ambiguity with regards to Taiwan?
And maybe my question is, are we trying to negotiate some sort of peace before it happens? In other words, are we trying to placate both sides enough so there won't be a war about Taiwan?
Well, who knows? You know, some of the most interesting commentary that came out about the 7-hour meeting in Rome was certainly not from our diplomats or their press representatives, but from people around the world who looked at this and recognized that there was a coming to that fork in the road situation here. And this from Tong Zhao, who is a Beijing-based fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. He suggests that the majority of the international community is very displeased by China's position, and China's international image may not get better as a result. It looks like China isn't very skilled at playing international geopolitical games. So what he's suggesting is that China is not looking good with respect to how it's handling this Ukraine situation throughout the world. You were kind of alluding to that earlier.
Yeah, I kind of agree to that completely, actually. They're not looking real slick on the world stage for that reason.
And he continues by saying that despite China's recent attempts to distance itself from Russia, Xi Jinping's approach remains fundamentally the same and very generic because, he says, I don't think China knows at this moment what major policy changes it should adapt. So he's suggesting that...
They're standing at the fork in the road.
They're standing at the fork of the road, and they're looking down there and trying to figure which fork to take. So that's a hugely significant one. One of the more interesting ones was from Andrew Small, who is a senior transatlantic fellow at the German Marshall Fund. And he said, there are small bits of tactical positioning to deal with, and he's talking about China's ability to deal with this Russian invasion of the Ukraine. There are small bits of tactical positioning to deal with the fallout of the backing China has extended to Russia, but nothing deviates from the fundamental support for Putin. This is a long-term bet that Xi Jinping has made. There are a lot of relationships that China has been willing to write off, but there is also the view that if you stick to certain countries and Russia is one you will bend over backward for. So he's suggesting that Xi has made his choice.
Fundamental decision.
His fundamental decision. And now he's trying to figure out how to smooth things over with the rest of the world as he goes off with Russia.
Interesting. Just to reiterate for our audience, we're doing our best to sift through all of this disparate information to provide some real meaningful value. I would like to point out, with regards to the alignment of China with Russia, that there's some other perspectives out there. China's ambassador to Ukraine, Feng Xirong, just recently, it was last Thursday actually, was assuring the Ukrainian people that China remains a quote-unquote friendly country for the Ukrainian people and would never attack Ukraine. He's said a couple things to sort of try and reassure Ukraine that I'll read this. We will respect the path chosen by Ukrainians because this is the sovereign right of every nation. Again, hitting on that concept of national sovereignty as being a sort of wedge against the West's influence in China.
Do you hear any "we will not support Russia" in that statement?
Not in that statement, but
it's rather ambiguous.
Well,
don't you think?
That's what they're doing. They're trying to walk the line.
Boy, it sure sounds like it.
They're trying to walk the line. They're trying to make everybody feel good.
Jonty makes a very good observation, though, about this, because of the fact that China is and has been friendly with Ukraine enough so they even have ambassadors and, embassies.
That's a big trading partner, yeah.
Yeah. And so now Ukraine's been invaded by Russia.
And China's there saying, we love you. We still love you.
We love both sides.
Mm-hmm. We love both sides. And yes, we're responding favorably to Russia's request that they bomb the hell out of you.
I know you guys I put up with my my ridiculous analogies, and I hope you'll forgive me one. It's kind of as though Russia and China became buddies, and they said, "Hey, let's go over to the West and let's go over to the West's party tonight." And China said, "Okay, but we're just going to take it easy, right?" And Russia said, "Oh yeah, we're going to take it easy." And they show up at the West's party, and Russia goes over to the drinks and pounds half a bottle of tequila, and then begins to dance on top of the table. And China thinks, "Oh, geez, God, I thought we said we were going to take it easy." I don't think that on February 4th, when China and Russia signed that joint declaration, that China was aware that Russia was going to do this. Now, there's obviously a contrary opinion.
Do.
No, actually, I agree with Jonty on this one. I think they got the wool pulled down on their eyes.
Let me read a little excerpt from Hu Wei, who is he holds a bunch of positions here. I think chairman of Shanghai Public Policy Research Association is probably enough credentials to describe this individual, who I believe is an academic, essentially. I'm going to skip ahead to the section in his dissertation here, section 3, very cogent to today's topic, China's strategic choice. Let me just read the first paragraph here, and then you guys can let me know what you think. China cannot be tied to Putin and needs to be cut off as soon as possible, in the sense that an escalation of conflict between Russia and the West helps divert U.S. attention from China. China should rejoice and even support Putin, but only if Russia does not fall. Being in the same boat with Putin will impact China should he lose power. Unless Putin can secure victory with China's backing, a prospect which looks bleak at the moment, China does not have the clout to back Russia. I found this particularly interesting. The law of international politics says that there are no eternal allies or perpetual enemies, but our interests are eternal and perpetual. I think that's a very interesting little bit of geostrategic thinking. Really not too different than a sort of China first policy or something along those lines. Let me continue. Under current international circumstances, China can only proceed by safeguarding its own best interests, choosing the lesser of two evils, and unloading the burden of Russia as soon as possible. At present, it is estimated that there is still a window period of 1 or 2 weeks before China loses its wiggle room. China must act decisively.
This from an academic.
I believe this is a person with a great deal of influence.
He's a member
China.
of China's cabinet.
He's a member of China's cabinet, and he's saying this about China.
Yeah. Right. He said is that we have a week or two to make the decision.
What he's also saying is that, at least what I read, and remember, I'm just the lay guy here. I'm the career radio broadcaster, but it appears to me that this person who's a member of some high positions in the Chinese government, he's saying, wait a minute, guys, we might not be going down the right path with this leader we've got.
Well, there's a lot of people in China, in both officialdom and not officialdom, who've been saying the same thing. One of the more significant Chinese intellectuals wrote an article and posted it that suggested the same thing, and he was banned. His article was taken down and banned because you can't say anything like that at this time.
So far, this one hasn't been banned. We got a hold of it.
We got a hold of it.
Jonty, am I wrong on this? Is there some subterfuge going on here?
And also, as I understand it, that view is by and large banned in the Chinese media. So if you were to say that we must turn our back on Russia in Chinese media or in social media,
you might disappear.
What you write would be disappeared, and who knows about you, right?
Yeah.
From what I've heard, the propaganda
is probably the right word.
Propaganda is probably the right word. The official state perspective that's kind of allowed within the Chinese population is, or at least has been decidedly pro-Russia. I find it very interesting to come across clips of Chinese television coverage where they have reporters embedded with Russian troops, whereas we have reporters embedded with Ukrainian troops. It really does kind of beg the question, though, as an independent news organization, why can't CNN have troops embedded on, have journalists embedded with both armies? And it's obviously there's a bit of a game being played in terms of what we perceive of happening. Some people are calling this the first true great information war. But China has, it does seem that their internal policy has been to support a more pro-Russian perspective of the whole situation.
Yeah.
The interesting thing with respect to Xi Jinping is that he has pretty much put his cards on the table that we are with Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And Xi Jinping, of course, is up for re-election.
Which is what, when Amy joins us in the second hour today, that's what we're going to talk about, because there, like we've been talking about, sort of alluding to in this hour, there is some dissension in the Chinese ranks within the country about Xi Jinping and about his power base and some other things.
Question then is that since Xi Jinping has pretty much made the stand for Russia, kind of signaling that he has selected which fork in the road he is going to take, can he turn about and take the other fork and maintain his good face?
I think he's hedging both forks in the road.
He's trying to.
I'm not convinced that he's decidedly taken one path or the other.
I'm not either.
There's a meeting tomorrow between Biden and Xi. And the contents of that meeting were probably prefaced in that 7-hour debate. If I had to take a wild guess, the United States is now seeing Europe strongly returned back to NATO, strongly returned back to the U.S.'s sphere of influence, where previously Germany and France and Italy, a couple places over there were having their doubts, and they were
but they got woke.
Well, I don't know if they got woke, but they
got woked up.
They got They certainly were urged to remember NATO.
Well, Germany's dramatically increasing their military spending and purchasing 35 F-35s. I'm pretty sure I got that number right.
Yeah, that is correct.
That's a decided change for them. One of the things that I think folks need to realize about the importance of all of these various military deals is that they create alliances. When you purchase a highly advanced piece of hardware like a fifth generation fighter from a particular country, you then need them to do repairs,
spare parts.
You're kind of part of a supply chain network that's critical to your nation's own defense. So Germany dropping the Typhoon for the F-35 is a very strong signal to Washington that, and also the shutdown of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, that Germany's kind of returning to a more traditional.
They've come back
NATO
into the fold.
So with NATO being reinvigorated in this way, also with the U.S. successfully calling on a variety of alliances to orchestrate this extraordinary regime of sanctions against Russia, I think Biden's pitching up. I think that 7-hour meeting did involve the U.S. kind of putting our cards on the table a little bit and saying, like, look, you guys, we really want this thing with Ukraine and Russia to go our way, and you have a lot of influence over Russia right now.
And what did we give them in return?
It could very well be that we're going to back off on Taiwan.
We gave them Taiwan for this?
Well, I was going to ask that question. Do you really think that we're going to give them Taiwan?
Well, what are we going to give them? I mean, we're dealing with Chinese, who are the best business people on earth.
I wouldn't go that far, but okay.
I mean,
they're pretty good, but I wouldn't go that far.
I would.
There's some pretty good Israeli business people as well.
There are aspects of the Chinese foreign policy blob. Let's call it the blob because they call it the blob here too, which wants to proceed down a more demilitarized path. They're quite happy to continue with the Belt and Road. There were billions of dollars worth of business deals that got broken up because of the invasion of Ukraine. Ukraine was a Belt and Road country, as we've mentioned before. They want to return to that type of development, wherein China's been doing extraordinarily well. China doesn't necessarily want to change. Not all of China. Maybe some hardliners do, but I think a good portion of the policy folks over there don't want to shift to a more adversarial military style of international relations. They know darn well that that's something that the West is particularly good at. And they don't necessarily have a leg up on us in that regard.
Well, what do you think they're looking for? I mean, what do you think, given the 7-hour meeting, that Xi Jinping is going to look at Joe Biden, and Joe Biden's going to say, first of all, that you cannot give Russia military hardware. You cannot do that. That's what Joe Biden is going to tell Xi Jinping. What is Xi Jinping going to tell Joe Biden?
You can't tell me what to do?
I'm not convinced about the military hardware thing.
I'm not either.
I haven't seen enough information to demonstrate to me that China is in fact shipping military hardware to Russia to support them in this conflict. But I did hear that China is not.
Well, that's what the Biden
Russia
administration put on the table before this meeting in Rome, is that it accused China
I know
of doing this.
But
it's like
can we
just a minute. It's just like accusing your significant other of cheating on you. You did this. That's what the Biden administration said. Now, what is Xi Jinping going to say?
Well, here's what I'm thinking. On the world stage of military hardware, does Russia need anything China's got? Because China's military hardware ain't that great.
Money.
No, we're talking
China
about...
has money, Billy.
But we're not talking about money. You can't shoot somebody with money. We're talking about actual military hardware.
No, we're talking about money. That's what the deal is.
Well, that's not what I read in several newspapers. The information I got was that China had promised military hardware to Russia.
Yes.
Now, okay, if that's the case...
Behind that is money.
Well, hold on, guys. Time out. China has promised military hardware to Russia. What I'm seeing is, in the words of senior U.S. officials, Russia requested that China provide weaponry. I don't know that China has promised to give them arms.
Well, then the follow-up to that was also that China looked favorably on doing so. That was in the press.
Okay, but here's my question then. Okay, if depending on what we're talking about, if we're talking about transferring funds, that's also been made very hard by the Biden administration at the moment. But also, if we're talking about transferring actual military hardware from China to Russia, as I understand it, and once again, I'm just a career radio broadcaster, but I read a lot of stuff about this. China's military hardware is basically inferior to our military hardware or anything we're going to supply to the Ukraine.
That wouldn't be true in a variety of categories. They've outclassed us in short-range missiles, for instance.
Yeah, so we're talking about Chinese technologies.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'm pretty sure our aircraft are vastly superior. Our drones are vastly superior. And I'm not sure about our missiles either.
I don't know if I bet on any of those. Quite frankly.
I wouldn't be too assertive about any of that, Billy.
Wait, though, really?
Yeah.
Because.
So what did China ask for? It asked for aircraft, I think. Russia asked for aircraft, drones, tanks.
I don't know if they asked for tanks. I know they asked for ammunition.
It kind of asks for just about everything you need to invade a country when it gets... So it kind of leads you to wonder what they have.
What I find so interesting about this discussion we're having now is their opposition, Russia's opposition, are largely Ukrainian citizens.
Right.
And they're not doing that well in the acquisition of
That's why they ask for help.
I understand that. So I guess what I'm saying is if we give these civilians in Ukraine some help.
So what is going to happen tomorrow when Xi Jinping and Joe Biden get together?
There's a question. Now there's the free-for-all in the discussion.
So we should be able to come to grips with that, or at least say what we think.
Well, I think we're going to find out.
So if Joe says don't give Russia any equipment, Xi Jinping is going to say, okay, what do I get in return?
Well, let me say this. In prior versions of this program, you and I and Jonty and both Nansu and Amy Howe have all talked about Joe Biden's meetings and his alliances with China. Remember? And there's big, loud discussions about, how Joe Biden's big buddy with Xi Jinping and Joe Biden's son made all these deals. Remember all that discussion we had?
$33 million in cash.
Okay, so do you think, because I remember all of those discussions we had before,
right?
Do you think when they sit down and have a little heart-to-heart talk amongst themselves as world leaders, Joe Biden's not going to bring all that up and say, hey, man.
You gave me $33 million to shut up?
We're friends. We've done a lot of business together. Shut up.
I don't really see the president as that easy to compromise. To a degree, that's the case, but I think that...
You think he's honest?
The president is the representative of a national security apparatus.
Which president are we talking about? Are we talking about Xi Jinping? Or are we
Well,
talking?
we're trying to talk.
I think we're talking about both of them.
We're trying to come to grips with what Xi Jinping is going to ask in return.
So what I see as being one of China's hedges, one of China's little ways of assuring itself that the United States wasn't going to go apoplectic and start doing things that really damage mainland China economically, has been that the U.S. has a sensitivity about the dollar as a reserve currency.
Ooh,
there you go.
And what the United States has now signaled our willingness to do is to put all of that on the line. Now, if we're willing to put all of that on the line, we're also in a position at this juncture, or very soon will be in a position to take all of this moral indignation with regards to our successful use of what might be, to a degree, propaganda with regards to what's happening in Ukraine, to galvanize our population to accept the same kind of sanction regime against China that we are right now very willing to accept against Russia. We could be looking at a unilateral with us or against us situation, where if you want to do business with the G7 and then some, then you're going to have to be on board with this our preferred resolution of this conflict.
Yeah, but Jonty, just a week or so ago, maybe a month ago, the Biden administration eliminated the China initiative. And so it would be incomprehensible to me that the administration that terminated all sanctions against China, or most all of them, would suddenly turn around and say, now we're going to really put the screws to you. Do you think Xi Jinping would believe that?
Well, Xi Jinping can see that we put the screws to Vladimir Putin, and we could do it to him if they don't toe the line.
Yeah, so what is Xi Jinping going to ask for? What is he going to ask for?
Taiwan. He's going to ask for Taiwan, but he ain't going to get Taiwan. I'm pretty sure about that.
How
There's
sure?
a question of how many cards. How many cards do either of these participants actually hold?
Well, there you go. Now, what do we hold? What do we have that China needs? What do we have that they don't already own?
Energy.
They need
investment.
Energy. They need investment, and they need market access.
Russia.
Yeah. No, I think Jonty just hit it on the head. They need market. Remember, we put China's made.
They already own the market access.
Well, but keep in mind
we just indicated that we would be willing to deny it. Previously, were the United States
who's going to deny
China?
that? Who's going to deny them? They already own our decision makers. So what? Have you ever seen anybody say no to China in the United States? Have you seen? Has Joe Biden ever said no to China? Don't think so.
There's a bill that's made it, I believe, all the way through. I think it was passed. That's going to invest a lot of money in moving industries from China back to the United States, particularly in the semiconductor industry. There are things that even the Biden administration, and don't interpret this as me thinking that they're particularly savvy. Even the Biden administration has continued some policies. Some of them have been a little on the soft side, which are still maintaining an adversarial position.
It's 255.
And Jonty, along those lines, I'll say this, and then we'll go to our commercial break for the top of the hour here. I will say this: when Ford Motor Company, when you order a truck or a car from Ford Motor Company and they can't deliver it for 4 months because there's not enough electronic chips to get it done, I guarantee you there's some pressure being put upon to move the chip factories back somewhere other than China. Anyway, on that
they're
note,
in Taiwan, by the way.
Well, guess what? What we've been talking about is the fact that Taiwan might not be available to us much longer.
So we have come to a fork in the road, have we not?
There's a joke there, which I'll leave off the table. We'll be right back on China Watch Radio. Now with the delicious ramen and sushi you'll find waiting for you at Kaito. Easy in and out location in the Capitola Mall food court. Special orders welcome. Fresh, delicious, and oh so good.
This is Koji. I'm looking forward to seeing you at my restaurant, Kaito.
If you think things couldn't get any worse, think again. We are now in completely uncharted territory, all of us, from the entire COVID-19 scenario to covert climate engineering operations in our skies to unfolding ecological collapse around the world. Converging catastrophes are closing in from countless directions. What cards will the controllers play next? If you want to hear questions and answers that corporate media won't touch, tune into the commercial-free, non-political Coming Collapse Question and Answer Hour. Our kickoff broadcast is this Saturday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. on KSCO 1080 AM. Call 831-479-1080 to join in the conversation. Again, the call-in number for the Coming Collapse Q&A Hour is 831-479-1080, starting this Saturday morning from 8 a.m. Join us for a shocking dose of reality. This is Dane Wigington from geoengineeringwatch.org.
Well, folks, the sun sets mighty early these days. That means we're all spending a lot more time indoors, watching TV, surfing the net, working out in the shop, in general, using up a lot of electricity. So let's ask Chris Jensen from JM Electric what all our indoor time portends for the electrical circuits behind our walls.
You are right, Charlie. We do spend a lot more time indoors in winter. And the more time we spend indoors, the more load we put on the electrical circuits that run throughout our homes. It's really important that our electrical circuits are up to carrying winter's load. Because if they are not, well, every year, thousands are injured or killed by home electrical fires.
How can we know if our electrical circuits are up to carrying the load, Chris?
First, folks can go to jmelectric.com and take the home electrical safety test. After they answer 12 simple yes or no questions, they will have a good idea about how safe they should feel. Second, folks can call JM Electric at 422-7819 and ask for a free current safe home assessment.
And be sure and tell them Charlie sent you.
At Batteries Plus, we do more than fix phones and tablets. We help our neighbors power their lives. Visit Batteries Plus in-store, curbside, and online for fast and reliable phone and tablet repair. Learn more at batteriesplus.com.
Think Local First radio show supports our locally owned businesses and governments each week to tell their own story, Saturdays from 2 to 3 p.m. Think Local First is sponsored by Tremonti's Italian Restaurant, located in the Seabride area, and Kiss by an Angel Wines, located in Scotts Valley. Come join Cammie Corvin and her hosts each week, Saturday from 2 to 3 on KSCO AM 1080 or KSCO.com. Think Local First, it's the only way to go.
And we're at the end of our first hour. I want to remind folks that if you would like to find out more about all the information we've been bringing up and hashing out in our first hour, go to ChinaWatchRadio.com and check out our show page and the Know Before the Show segments. And check it out because we think you'll find the information most valuable. Particularly if you're following along our discussion rather closely, you'll know that a lot of information has been all brought together into one place, and so we hope that you'll check that out. We'll be back for our second hour of China Watch Radio for this Thursday, coming up after we bring you up to date with some national news and information, a look at traffic and weather, and then we'll be back right here on AM 1080 KSCO Santa Cruz, Salinas, Monterey. Good afternoon. It's 3 o'clock.
52. On smaller local roadways, there's a hard closure on South Carmel Hills Drive just east of Highway 1 due to a sinkhole that developed there this morning. High temperatures are forecasted to be in the high 60s through at least Sunday, with lows between 38 and 41 degrees for the same time period. There is a small craft advisory in effect through this evening. Time now 6 minutes after 3 p.m., and that means it's time for China Watch Radio.
China Watch Radio is brought to you in part by Sushi Market Sprouts on 7th in Santa Cruz and Kaito in the Capitola Mall Food Court. Treat yourself to the finest Japanese cuisine you'll find anywhere with fresh sushi to go and delicious ramen dinners. Sushi Market Sprouts and Kaito. Yum! Hour number number 2 of this edition of China Watch Radio on AM 1080 KSCO Santa Cruz. I want to thank you for staying with us through the news break at the top of the hour. In this hour, we have an old friend in the studio with us. Amy Howe is here. Hello. How are you?
Hello. Very good. Excellent.
Now, we've been talking a lot about China and Russia and China and the United States and both countries. A lot of information has gone through the pipeline today. I want to ask you, Amy, you want to talk about something that's a slightly different direction in our program now. The fact that China has some internal discussions about who should be in charge. And you, because of your perspective and because of the people you know who currently still reside in China, you have let us know that all is not copacetic for Xi Jinping. Am I right about that?
Yeah. I want to talk about a little bit information inside China.
Would that make it inside information?
Inside information. I say that is, China's all propaganda, doing everything. So basically outside, especially right now, before we would get some information from Hong Kong media, but Hong Kong's gone, so we don't have any information for that. And then usually we get it from a Western media, which was send the people there to report some, but not anymore. I don't know, is China don't want the people to know, they just locked it down. Also, they don't care anymore. Doesn't matter if you're talking bad about this, so what? So what you gonna do with me? So that kind of attitude really changing, I feel that. So only thing I can get some information is a one-on-one basis through the social media, but not in the group chat. Almost every group chat we've been, they delete everything you posted. And we post something here, they're not able to read. They post something we're not able to read.
Things like WeChat.
That's the only thing right now can use. And so one-on-one, I still able to get some information out, but they're all very scared. They just tell you what's happening, but no opinions on anything. So,
no opinion.
Yeah, they don't just say what's happening. I say, is that happening? Yes, that, Then some details, absolutely, it doesn't look like it's a political thing. So that's still allowed. So interesting enough, right now they were talking about, I don't know, American media is reported that have about 52 million people in China quality. So maybe we know a little bit about that. Most important is the Shanghai city, 15 million people, entire city all quarantine.
All quarantine?
Quarantine. So that what it means.
For COVID?
For COVID. They say bigger thing coming again. We're going to have this virus called a BA 2.2 or something. Did you heard about that?
Yes, I have.
Something. And so first was Hong Kong, and lots of people die. They don't have a medical support, and people can't even burn the bodies. So pad it up or something. They make this, I think, is kind of propaganda to scare Shanghai people or scare the 52 million people in China, mostly in bigger cities like Shenzhen, also important places, and they all locked down.
Manufacturing places as well.
Yes.
Amy,
Yeah.
Amy, if I could, I just want to explain for our audience what you're talking about with regards to these lockdowns, because what I understand is that it's nothing like what we had here, where we were politely asked to stay home or things along those lines. With Australia being perhaps on the extreme end of all of that. From what I understand, the circumstance is that entire neighborhoods are being cleared out and bused to quarantine facilities where folks are put in essentially small cells wherein they pay the rent and they pay for the food and they're required to stay there for roughly about 2 weeks. And there's something along the lines of I read somewhere that there's 2,000 something odd provinces or regions in China, and each one is required to build one of these quarantine camps. So we're talking about massive infrastructure being built to house people in complete isolation when they're in quarantine.
That's true. I can tell you little details. Because I ask people details. I say, you're still at home? They say yes. I say, how the quarantine goes? They say, each household, you have one person can do shopping every 12 days. The last couple of times they quarantine is every 3 days you go shopping. Somewhere they will deliver the food in front of the building, and then just you can one person coming down to pick up. But now is every 12 days. Only
Have you
one
heard that,
person.
That hunger is a problem?
Not yet. Not in big city. Yeah.
Okay.
And but another thing is that they make a huge money for COVID test. You had to pay. Here,
Well, they're mandatory tests.
Yeah,
right?
mandatory. You had to pay. So they talking about somebody was released some number, 682 million yuan they make for just a test, because in the 12 days you had to at least four times each person. Think about it. Lots of people in China, right? So that's big money. So
now I've heard that everybody has an app on their phone which tracks their status.
That's right. Health status, yeah.
And if your app in any way shows that you haven't taken the test that you're required to take, or that you haven't had the vaccine, or that you have been either exposed or heaven forbid, found guilty of having the dreaded virus, then you're not allowed to enter a store. In some cases, I believe folks even aren't allowed to return to their own homes. Have you heard anything?
Yeah. So, for instance, they shut down somewhere. Lots of people trapped in the one temple, Buddhist temple, and they had 72 hours just in the same place. And you can't go anywhere. And talking about tracking the phone, the app they have is by color, red and blue and green. And by color, so they know exactly how to trade you. And also, nobody there can say, I don't want to test, I don't want to quarantine. One woman, she says she'd rather die. So I saw the video. Somebody took her, tried to jumping out of the high-rise building. She says she didn't want to take away to the quarantine hospital.
Well, I'm looking at a video right now just to give our audience an idea of how extreme this is. I'll just read the caption. And I'll let you imagine what the video is. This 4-year-old girl with a hazmat suit on is being sent off to a COVID quarantine camp alone. Imagine your 4-year-old child being taken away by essentially the medical authorities to go and spend over 2 weeks alone in a cell. It breaks my heart.
So I saw the video. The woman is an older woman. She tried to jump in. So they was pulled her out, but still sent her to jail. Because they just passed a new law. If you against anything government wants you to do, regarding the COVID, and you refuse to do, and immediately sentenced to jail. They have a different kind of sentence just recently.
Amy, you mentioned the fact that you thought this is about propaganda. What do you mean by that?
No, I'm talking about is that thing made me thinking and make lots of people thinking. Why Shanghai? Why now?
And Shenzhen.
In Shenzhen, all those places. So what's going on?
So let me ask a question, because I'm unfamiliar with the region we're talking about, except that I know it on a map. What is Shanghai famous for?
Shanghai is famous for this economy center, And
so that's why they're concentrating on the propaganda in that region.
And Shenzhen,
Shenzhen also is the first, the
manufacturing area.
Yes, and Shanghai too. So that's very important.
It's like the money.
Yeah, it's like a heart.
Now I understand
of the nation.
Yeah. So now that clarifies it for our audience as well.
Had to be controlled.
Yeah.
So the reason is they have the political meeting right now, Politburo meeting, started February 25th.
The Politburo's meeting.
Politburo, yeah. So actually, they say they were talking about the economy. Maybe that's true. It's right now they have lots of difficulties, but important is Xi Jinping still gonna be in leadership or not?
Well, see, that's what I was about to ask you.
Yeah.
This is the deciding period?
Deciding period. Probably 2 more weeks. That's why they want to lock down Shanghai for 2 more weeks.
Now, can I ask...
2 of days.
Let me ask the question, the elephant in the room question here. Does anybody really think Xi Jinping is not going to stay in power? Really?
I think, in China, people... everything operating, they call in the dark box. Like you develop in the film, in the dark room and dark box.
Right.
So nobody will know anything. And you're not allowed to talk about it. But still, something leaking out. And then you had to speculating like this person will attend a meeting or not to determine he's still in or he be house arrested. It's just like that, like a Jack Ma, house arrest thing, nobody knows. And finally release, come out, and then we'll know a little bit of what's going on, right? So actually they were talking about who's going to be next in power. And but Shanghai is a pretty modern, thinkings people, and also surrounding areas. People, to my knowledge, they all pro-America. They wanted to
which is why they've been locked down.
Yeah, they wanted to have a good relationship with America. They think that's the way, direction to go for everybody. Country will be better. People will be have better life. They definitely don't want to be with Russia.
Now, where's the significant presence of Jiang Zemin's faction?
Yeah, that's talking about Jiang Zemin's faction. This power struggle, Jiang Zemin and Xi Jinping, is for long, long time. And so every year, November is a determined date to who gonna be in power or just disappear or say no more. Now, they don't talk about it. They just don't let anybody talk about the things. So you had to speculate and think about. So Jiang Zemin, the thing was it go on and on almost every year. So people think why Xi Jinping still in power is he has to make a compromise. For basically, we know where they call Communist Party, actually just the oligarch, small group of people
making the decision.
Control entire country,
right?
Because they have all the money.
Just like the United States.
Yeah, they have all the money. So where I say corporation, right? They don't even corporate. They're just the group. They can be private corporation, whatever the things they would do. But basically, is those children of the communist officer, just same as in Russia, oligarchs, and then translate the power to the money. But they are smart, I think, so they're awfully rich. Of course, Russian are very rich because they have a resource. But the China's have everything. Everything. They can make everything, They don't have a resource. It's true. They always lack of oil, that's the country. What can you say, right? But they can make everything because they have a human resource.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to point out...
Is the Jiang Zemin faction in Shanghai and Shenzhen, or is that the Xi Jinping faction?
No, Jiang Zemin faction.
So that's another reason why everybody's getting locked up.
Yeah.
So no, John,
then I had to talk about one character. I don't know he do or die. Probably very soon we will know. He's the one probably going to take over Xi Jinping's position. And they have 7 most powerful people in political bureau. He's one of them. And also, he used to be mayor of the Shanghai.
Oh.
Yeah, and then he was a senior prime minister in China right now. So he's representing Shanghai. So they never talk about before. Now they a little bit, even in some kind of meeting, talk about, he says Shanghai, this area, greater Shanghai, of course, should be not for other people to lead. Should be Shanghai people to lead.
Because they are leading they're leading the country in terms of
economic.
Yeah,
economics,
definitely, yeah.
So Jonty, you wanted to ask something a minute ago?
As is so in the case, I wanted to say something strange. It just occurs to me that we're discussing the tomorrow's meeting between Xi and Biden and what cards they hold. Biden's party is up against an extremely difficult November election, and the biggest issue is inflation. I would imagine that having major lockdowns in China's high-tech and industrial center is going to have a substantial impact on the inflation of various consumer goods in the United States. I don't know what you all think about that.
Yeah, definitely. Then talking about it, they were down the line. They were talking about the Tesla. Has a big factory in Shanghai. So they gonna knock down. They say if he continue to work on the Starlink for Ukraine, so they're gonna shut down his factory.
Oh, tit for tat.
I haven't heard that. That's very.
You didn't? Yeah, they were talking about a lot of that thing. And then they also talk about other things. I'm talking about the meeting. You guys just talk about very well. You talk about that. But Taiwan, actually, they talking about only just a bargaining chip. They not really want to talk about Taiwan.
Right.
You know why? Interesting enough, I think we had to be very careful on the issues because right now is called Democratic Progress Party is a ruling party in Taiwan, right? So they are anti-CCP, but the Kuomintang, KMT, that was always ruling party.
Chiang Kai-shek party.
Yeah, they all already, for a long time, they already
Pro
CCP. I would say they bought by CCP.
Wow, that's a significant turn.
Yeah, so
China, if I may interject,
yeah,
China bought the elites of the CCP in the same way that they have purchased the elites of the United States.
Yes, because they believe. Also, they succeed. I think they believe money can buy everything, anybody. So far, they succeed.
Right. Well, Taiwan has very close economic relations with China.
Yeah.
Foxconn that everybody always talks about.
Yeah.
Is in fact,
they,
a Taiwanese company.
Tremendous investment from Taiwan. People live there, So they were talking, I think a couple of times they even saying why America had to interfere China and Taiwan. There is one country, one same race, same history, just like Korea. They talking about you out, you out. You don't have to between us. We can talk, become one. But the reason that right now the ruling party, Democratic Progress Party, won the election is because Hong Kong. That time Hong Kong, so she just right in because of that moments. So Taiwan people say, Hong Kong is our future. Yeah. So they were like that. But how long they were? So they, the Xi Jinping, CCP, they not worry about that much because 2022, this 2020 they got. So the next election, if Kuomintang becoming that, so It's easy. You don't have to use force
Right,
to
right,
take
exactly.
over Taiwan. So Taiwan is not the bargaining chip, just talking. Everybody know in the surface is bargaining chip. American, oh, you're gonna do that, the things. It's not, So I have some kind of bad feelings about the meeting.
What's happening?
What's
really,
going to be?
sure.
Yeah.
Now,
Right.
is there any? Let me ask you this because I'm asking from ignorance. Let's say that we don't back Taiwan enough to keep it from going back to mainland China. Would Taiwan drastically change?
No,
Look at Hong Kong.
Look at Hong Kong. They just make another government. So,
But
everything changed.
But Taiwan is such a tourist mecca from a lot of the world.
Same as Hong Kong.
Same as Hong Kong.
But China can
Hong
make
Kong
a lot
was
of
financial
money.
center before China opened
So where all
the
the
door
Chinese
for
culture
years.
went is to Taiwan.
Yeah, that's true.
So why would they not? Why would they give up all that revenue from people going to want to see it and experience it?
Very good question. I even asked the Taiwan people, they invest in China because the truth is, I always tell them, I say, you never live in the Communist Republic. You don't know.
Yeah.
They will promise you everything, then take away.
And that's exactly what you discovered in life, right?
That's right.
That's
yeah.
exactly
But then
right.
those people, they invest in mainland China, they all escaped from 1949 to Taiwan. So they're getting...
But it's been long enough from 1949 till now for their descendants to forget all that.
Under American help, right, protection, so they're getting rich. So they have the money. And then they say, China opened the door, say, we're going to become same as American, so invest China. We are same country, same race, people, we're all Chinese. So please, so they did. So right now they have lots of money there, and they still hoping, and
hope springs eternal.
Do you think they are coming to realize, as are some of our companies here in the United States, that only the CCP owns anything in China? Do you think they know that yet?
They realize that?
They know very well. They're not stupid. They're very smart, but they know that. But the point is, lots of real estate investment you can take with you. That's the point, And China always say that I offer like partnership, joint venture, or say I offer the land, and to you, and the resource, human resource, labors, whatever, and those things you can take with you. So you put the money building a factory there.
Well, as I understand it, isn't it a 75-year lease?
Yes,
generally?
75. Yeah,
75 years,
Yeah.
and then after that, you don't own it anyway.
I know. And then at the beginning, they only have like a hotel. You go build a hotel. That time they don't have any hotel in Shanghai, I'm talking about. So Japanese investors of hotel, they say 5 years. And you can make money and for 5 years.
5-year lease?
Yeah, so what the Japanese did, and they're very smart. So I went to stay in a Japanese hotel 1980 something, and was very early time, and I said, how come this so cheap? So the guy said that, they gave him 5 years to make all the money. 5 years later, that's theirs. So they do all the maintenance. So I use cheapest material, everything.
It seems to me like that's exactly what China did to build its infrastructure. It borrowed the money, it built the infrastructure, and then essentially it's going bankrupt on a lot of that infrastructure, the empty buildings and whatnot. And those who lent them the money are going to be the ones who built China and lost their money doing it.
Yeah.
It does make you wonder, though, when I hear these stories, particularly the one Amy just told about how inexpensively built the hotel was.
Yeah.
Does make you wonder about, the the bullet train that goes 159 miles.
Which is, if you look at the finances behind the bullet train, there's 2 or 3 routes that make money on the bullet train, and all of the rest of the routes lose money hugely. And those who have lent money to build those bullet trains throughout China are really left holding the bag. If China ever decides to stop subsidizing those routes, they're going to be out of money. Just like all of those people who lent money to Evergrande.
Mm-hmm.
That owes,
the real estate company that we've been talking about for months on the program. So my thought is, if they've built the railroads the way they built the hotel, maybe I don't want to go on that maglev train that might go flying off the track because the cement fails. Or you know what I mean?
Yes.
It's a little scary.
There are lots of cities, those big high-rise buildings fall because the quality of that. Because you can pay those inspector to go through those lousy.
And pass it even though it's...
I was very worried about, especially Shanghai, high density, the buildings. Like a forest, cement forest, that's what they call. So if fall, everybody die.
Yeah.
Millions
well,
people.
like the Centennial Tower in downtown San Francisco, for example.
Yeah.
Amy, may I take you back a little bit to the whole notion of common prosperity and the fact that Xi Jinping decided to make a great about face with his economy and turn away from business and money and all of the money that was being made vis-a-vis people like Jack Ma. And he turned his back on that and pulled the plug. And I wonder if that did not have something to do with the money centers and the political opposition of the Jiang Zemin faction in Shanghai and Shenzhen and places like that. Did he take away their money because of the pending election?
Yeah, but I think right now is very kosher. They say they talk about the economy things. So they have a lot of problems. So they believe, I'm talking Shanghai is a leader of the economy in the entire country. They also believe Shanghai would, the people were doing much better. They believe Xi Jinping didn't know anything about the economists, And he know how to be an emperor, how to play the political game and use corruption fight or something to get rid of the oppositions, like a Mao. So they believe he become more and more like Mao,
Because he doesn't know how to do business.
Yeah, doesn't. So they want him out because this is the time. Okay, you talk about economy. So that meeting is for economy. So they think you're not fit to be a leader. So who are against him is the Shanghai Gang, they call.
Which is the Jiang Zemin faction.
Leader by Han Zheng, a young guy, I think, not that young. They all almost 68, born 1954 or something like that. So they think he should take over.
So let me ask.
So they say, okay, not that easy. Are you kidding me? And so they Shanghai, you always brag about they're doing very well, the COVID, really, they control so good. So now, lockdown, whole city, 50 million people.
Let me ask the question then. Why, look, the current leader, Xi Jinping, has a skill set. He's very good at staying in power.
Only thing good, I guess.
Could he not appoint or make somebody who's really good at business in charge of that, and then he controls that? You know what I mean? Why does the leader have to be smart in everything? Why can't he delegate the smartness about?
Aren't you describing oligarchy?
It's already. But it is oligarchy already.
You know Stalin. So all the dictators, they wanted to stay power forever. They always suspect somebody gonna get them out or assassinate them or whatever,
Right.
Paranoid. Universally
totally,
paranoid.
yeah. So
Billy,
Xi
one
Jinping
of
in
the-
this stage right now, very much so, more than ever.
Go ahead, Jonty.
I was going to say one of the laws of power from the fantastic book 48 Laws of Power, forgive me, I don't remember the name of the author, is never outshine the master. So were you to appoint somebody to a position of significant influence and they were to actually excel in that position, they would then be a prime candidate for an anti-corruption campaign prosecution.
Okay, so what you're basically saying is that if you want to be the supreme leader in China or any other dictatorship, you have to be good at holding on to power, but relatively good at controlling things like the military and finances and other stuff.
Have you ever given somebody that you worked for an idea and then they took credit for the idea?
Yes.
Consider how dangerous it is to stand up and say, "Oh, actually, that was my idea. I just want to clarify." That's just one of the general concepts with regards to these authoritarian hierarchical systems that you will force a degree of incompetence on your supporters merely by virtue of their desire not to to outshine you.
You know, it's funny you should mention that because I was taught how to be a manager by my father, who was an international expert in business, and he told me, you just have to operate on three principles: find the best people you can to do the job, show them the best way you know how to do the job, and then let them do it.
Amy, we've been talking a lot today about the decision facing Xi Jinping about which direction to turn.
Which road to drive down.
Which
to
road.
stand by America or stand by Russia.
There you go.
Yeah, I think basically he had to use this opportunity, to show how that you can use the military power or force to rule the world or rule the entire Asia or whatever. So how far can go?
So if that's his goal, is to use military power to rule, which direction do you think would give him the greatest ability to exercise that power? Would it be by establishing a relationship with Vladimir Putin or Joe Biden?
Well, I think then, right now he saw Putin just go ahead and not successful.
Not yet.
Not yet.
I don't think he will. And then also you had to remember China with Russia, the trade only 5% of the Chinese economy.
Right.
And but the trade with Europe, other countries, NATO's peoples, and with lots of and also the only way, lots of times they get new technology is from Europe. Mm-hmm. Not from, because we say we're not going to give it to you or whatever, right? To U.S. I'm talking about. And so he had to wait it and to choose.
Right.
And also you think, then I'm talking about internally. Lots of people probably against him.
Right. Yeah, a lot of
yeah, so he maybe no more Xi Jinping, not the Xi Jinping with America, with Russia. Where's Xi Jinping?
And that's why everybody in Shanghai is locked up.
Yeah.
Now,
never been like that. You think about also they come on the idiot things. My friend just yesterday in Shanghai told me, he said, I don't know what to do with the next, rest of my life now. They say one community, they divided by different little community, is 50, 60,000 people. If you have one test, no sentence, just a test, and this entire community had to re-quarantine another 12 days. So go on and on and on, So that's the way to control.
Just with one case of COVID.
COVID, not COVID, it's not even, just test.
One test.
One test, you had to think about 50, 60,000 people. Also, what kind of test do you use?
Yeah,
Can
well,
you
see,
trust?
yeah, well, see, that was the big thing. Is I read that the Chinese test is not terribly accurate.
Yeah, that's why they did it for the Olympic people. Lots of people complaining about. They say they now qualify for compete.
Yeah, because
they
the
took
test wasn't quite accurate.
So I think John T. made mention of the fact that, or maybe it was Amy made mention of the fact that Russia's economy is only 7% of China. Do you think Russia would make a good property of China? No?
No.
Why not?
Why do you think it will?
Because Russia has all of the natural resources that China needs.
Yeah, but they were way behind.
Well, Russia is
technology things.
Yeah.
This war, you see it. You know.
Well, that's
so
what I meant.
Clearly.
How would Russia compete with China if China decided to take over Russia?
Well, I think
I don't think.
Look, in all honesty, judging by past performance of the Russian people, who are very, very tough people, if you look at, I don't think China would have a particularly good time trying to control the citizens of Russia. They're very opinionated and very tough people.
Well, we're talking
China
about,
never conquer anything in history.
That's what
only other people conquer them.
Right.
You're
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Just naturally. I don't know. Chinese people is kind of meek. They're not the attackers.
But we were talking
they
about...
only attack inside their own people.
Yeah. But we were talking
it's true,
about
very cool, but they're not outside.
Yeah.
We were talking about using force to become dominant. And that's what you were just talking about.
But
using military force to take over Asia or take over the world. And if China was thinking like that...
Isn't China thinking more economically than militarily?
Yeah, in that regard, I would like to point out that there has been a variety of overtures with regards to Chinese business acquisition.
There you go. They're just buying Russia.
Of various Russian resource
you don't have to bomb.
Businesses.
You buy.
You just buy it.
Yeah, that's what I heard at that time, 1980s. Japan was very aggressive.
What were you going to say, John T.?
Well, I mean, I really concluded the sentiment. Russia would like to have a lot more investment given the circumstances. But there's a variety of very interesting things happening with regards to things like acquisition of gold. We brought that up a little bit with when Amy quizzed us, and we barely got out with our pride.
But you didn't take the prize. Offer it to a free trip.
I also think that the value of Russia's companies and stock market has gone down significantly with its invasion of the Ukraine.
Absolutely.
Thereby making properties, those natural resource properties in Russia, very attractive acquisition targets for China.
And for other countries.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Strangely enough.
If you want a piece of rock.
For instance, Japan, they bought a lot of resource. Like a coal mine, coal, they don't use it, but they put it somewhere. They say one of these days we had to use it.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Japan,
yeah. Because they have a lot of money. They even want to build things on the moon, because too much money to spend. How you can see another planet.
What do you think Xi Jinping is going to ask of Joe Biden?
Yeah,
tomorrow?
what do you think the meeting's going to, how it's going to go tomorrow?
When Joe Biden says, Xi Jinping, I don't want you to give Russia any weapons to invade Ukraine with. And Xi Jinping is going to say, well, this is what I want. What is he going to want?
Now, first of all, you would, I think in the surface, first thing is about Taiwan. He will say that just back off Taiwan. Whatever we're going to do to Taiwan is not your business. Agree or not?
There you
do
go.
you think that's going to fly?
Well,
Because I think the United States is under enormous pressure from the countries that we're really tight with to maintain the status quo in that region.
yeah.
And
We really all are at this fork of the road. Which direction are we going to take?
Yeah, we could underestimate how upset China is about AUKUS and all of the alliances that have been built just recently. I've heard rumblings all over the place that they're really unhappy about this. You guys are building a NATO in our backyard. That's the sort of accusation that they're making, of course, with the intimation that you guys are provoking us in the same way that you provoked Russia.
Yeah. Is that Andrew Small, the guy with the German Marshall Fund, said of China that they're making a long-term bet, Xi Jinping has made. There are a lot of relationships that China has been willing to write off, but there is also a view that you stick to a certain countries, and Russia is one you will bend over backwards for. Would he? Will he? I don't know.
Well, we've done the same. Look, if you're going to use that example, the United States has done that same thing with countries it's aligned with around the world. You can point to the United States and Israel, for example, the United States and Australia, for example, the United States.
South Korea would be a good example.
South Korea and Japan. All of these are very good examples of us being really tight with some other nations.
You guys was first hour talk about the meeting in Rome, Cavalier Hotel, right? Actually, they did talk about lots of things about the North Korea. So that's another bargaining thing is South Korea. So American, you cannot give them this, that. That's China would say that. Another thing is India. In the Thai, India and Russia, the military, 1960s,
they're traditional.
border war. Basically, Russians supplied everything and had a border war with China in 1960s. And then, of course, China won the war. And then they found out everything, weapons, everything, all from Russia. But that was a Cold War with Russia.
Yeah.
China said we're going to have a nuclear war. China and Russia never have love. Never.
No, that's true.
Before now.
Never.
That's
They
true.
just
This is the
people too.
closest-
I'm talking about even people. You will ask Chinese people, you love America or Russia? They all say, no, Russia. No. Even people, just average people. Just historically.
At least in Shanghai.
Yeah, until now.
Yeah.
Now everybody's happy, right?
Now, with regards to regards to India, they're still purchasing arms.
No, so later I'm have a news, and that the meeting they talk about one thing. Nobody reported in South Asia. So India have mistakenly have a missile into Pakistan.
Oh yeah.
So then
That's a big problem too.
defended by Chinese.
Yeah.
So Chinese right now.
Well, India and Pakistan have always
I
had
know,
it.
but the Chinese get it to Pakistan.
Sure.
They are so they immediately get that. And so that's another thing. Had to talk about that. But I didn't know that. So India to this point, and they never say anything about Russia. They know this
would you?
war.
Would you really?
Of course not.
Jonty, what were you going to say?
Just that India has continued to purchase arms from Russia.
Yeah.
That Russia's still closely tied to India in that way. And given that India is actually in this perpetual adversarial situation with Pakistan, India really relies on those arms. It's part of their whole national security. And it's one of the reasons why India is brokering ways for the Reserve Bank of India and the Bank of Russia to continue transactions in spite of all the various sanctions, such that Russia can continue to support India's armed forces.
And of course, we always forget that India, among the most populous countries in the world, India is right up
But
there.
you had to think about the population because the number talks.
Yeah.
There you go. And that's been
Yeah.
China's stock and trade.
Yeah.
Now, have you thought about the impact of China's population bomb, wherein the young are getting older and there aren't as many young anymore? And within a generation, China's going to be looking at a population of senior citizens.
Well,
that
they
need
won't be able to field
supported.
an army to defend themselves if they chose to do so.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So for the long run, for the populations, India is the winner.
India?
Yeah. So
Oh,
you will
right.
see the rising of that. Also, they're very smart people.
Yep.
Look at Silicon Valley.
Oh,
There
yeah,
you
for
go.
sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's because they all get PhDs in mathematics
Yeah.
And chemistry, yeah.
Yeah.
because there's nothing else to do. So that they all get
Sad.
PhDs in mathematics, and they are smart. Yeah, and I think it's part of their culture too to become smart. To fight for
Yeah.
the
They have a
education.
more drive than Chinese. You're talking about the youngsters here.
Well, we
in
never-
Silicon Valley.
Speaking
and
of that, we never
compete
did-
with Indian people. Oh, I think Chinese are losing.
Well, speaking of that drive,
Silicon Valley.
and that we never did tie you down to a decision about which fork
Yeah.
Xi Jinping is going to walk down. We never did get your opinion.
I don't know. Right now, I think I want to wait another week. There's Xi
Okay.
Jinping or not Xi Jinping.
Well, in another
I
week,
hope. Probably 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
So we have a tremendous difference.
who is
I'm
it-
hoping, but
who is it that said, somebody famous once said, and I forget who it is, I wish somebody would remind me, but he said, careful what you wish for. Because, Xi Jinping is a dictator and he's a bad human being, but at least we know him.
Well,
we
he
do-
might
we don't
be a
know
good
who
human being. He might be a good human being. How do you know he's a bad human being? He could be a good human being, but just a dictator, and therefore.
Mao think he's a good.
Ask any
He's
Uyghur.
the savior of the Chinese people, right?
ask-
Mao Zedong.
Hey,
He think
there you
it's-
go.
yeah.
Ask any member of the Uyghurs whether he's a good person or not. I rest my case.
I think a lot of that has to do with the CCP itself and the continuous threat the CCP sees in everything around it.
Well, you might be right about that.
And whoever is going to be running the CCP is going to embody that paranoia that the world is out to get you. And,
Well, isn't that true?
Whether it's the Uyghurs or the Christians or the
Well, you could talk.
Falun Gong practitioners.
Yeah, and the Buddhists and the,
and the
ask the
taxi cab
Dalai
drivers.
Lama if he likes Xi Jinping. I'm pretty sure you're going to get a pretty succinct answer on that one.
But generally speaking, I'm talking about with lots of people live in China like me. We will go through all different leaderships, right?
Yeah.
After Mao, Deng Xiaoping and Jiang Zemin, and then
So how
Hu
does he-
Jintao.
how does he-
So they think he was really go back to Mao's
Mao.
time.
yeah.
Yeah. So I compare. I don't say they all good. Now, Communist Party, the way they're doing this, basically entire systems are almost same. But for the leader, they compare in which period, which under their leadership, and people have more freedom, and so
Well, there you go.
obviously,
Well,
Xi
these lockdowns are certainly profound. I believe it's a massive human tragedy that is the closest thing to the Cultural Revolution that I've been aware of in Chinese history. I think that something really big is happening and nobody's reporting on it.
Well, on that note, we're just about out of time.
Yes, they are. And here we are.
I want to thank Amy for her expertise and for her perspective. We had her on the program today to give us the inside look at what she thinks might happen here in the next couple of days. Anyway, thank you so much for being with us. And we'll remind folks to go to our page that gives all the information ChinaWatchRadio.com. You can find out about all the articles we have introduced into today's program. We'll be back to finish the program up in just a moment. Satisfy your hunger with a fresh, prepared, twice-daily grab-and-go sushi you'll find waiting for you at Sushi Market Sprouts, 2 blocks from the beach at 300 7th Avenue in Santa Cruz. Fresh, delicious, and oh so good.
Hello, I'm Junko, and I look forward to serving you at the Sushi Market Sprouts.
If you think things couldn't get any worse, think again. We are now in completely uncharted territory, all of us, from the entire COVID-19 scenario to covert climate engineering operations in our skies to unfolding ecological collapse around the world. Converging catastrophes are closing in from countless directions. What cards will the controllers play next? If you want to hear questions and answers that corporate media won't touch, tune into the commercial-free, non-political Coming Collapse Question and Answer Hour. Our kickoff broadcast is this Saturday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. on KSCO 1080 AM. Call 831-479-1080 to join in the conversation. Again, the call-in number for the Coming Collapse Q&A Hour is 831-479-1080, starting this Saturday morning from 8 a.m. Join us for a shocking dose of reality. This is Dane Wigington from geoengineeringwatch.org.
Well, folks, the sun sets mighty early these days. That means we're all spending a lot more time indoors, watching TV, surfing the net, working out in the shop, in general, using up a lot of electricity. So let's ask Chris Jensen from JM Electric what all our indoor time portends for the electrical circuits behind our walls.
You are right, Charlie. We do spend a lot more time indoors in winter. And the more time we spend indoors, the more load we put on the electrical circuits that run throughout our homes. It's really important that our electrical circuits are up to carrying winter's load. Because if they are not, well, every year, thousands are injured or killed by home electrical fires.
How can we know if our electrical circuits are up to carrying the load, Chris?
First, folks can go to jmelectric.com and take the home electrical safety test. After they answer 12 simple yes or no questions, they will have a good idea about how safe they should feel. Second, folks can call JM Electric at 422-7819 and ask for a free current safe home assessment.
And be sure and tell them Charlie sent you.
At Batteries Plus, we do more than fix phones and tablets. We help our neighbors power their lives. Visit Batteries Plus in-store, curbside, and online for fast and reliable phone and tablet repair. Learn more at batteriesplus.com.
Think Local First radio show supports our locally owned businesses and governments each week to tell their own story, Saturdays from 2 to 3 p.m. Think Local First is sponsored by Tremonti's Italian Restaurant, located in the Seabride area, and Kiss by an Angel Wines, located in Scotts Valley. Come join Cammie Corvin and her hosts each week, Saturday from 2 to 3 on KSCO AM 1080 or KSCO.com. Think Local First, it's the only way to go.
And that's our program for this week. We want to remind you China Watch Radio is heard every Thursday beginning at 2 o'clock Pacific time here on AM 1080 KSCO Santa Cruz. We'll also remind you that you can go find out all about our program and about the articles we talk about and the information we gather each week, ChinaWatchRadio.com. Coming up next on KSCO Santa Cruz is Flight 1080. The boys are warming the airplane up, and hopefully the propellers will stay on this time as they careen down the runway at way too fast. Anyway,